He pointed his finger at me in front of everyone and shouted, "You are nothing! You're a disgrace to this family!" My body froze, my heart sank, and the courtroom fell silent. But none of them knew. In just a few seconds, the truth would flip the entire room upside down. My name is Claire. I am 29 years old and I serve in military law. But to my father, I was always the failure, the mistake, the daughter who never mattered. Even on the most important day of my life, standing in court for something bigger than myself, my dad chose to humiliate me. I never thought I would tell this story publicly, but maybe someone watching this needs to hear it. Because life has a strange way of breaking you down, only to lift you up when you least expect it. So if you're listening right now, don't just pass by. Stay with me until the end of this story. And if my journey moves you, please leave a comment, share this video with someone who needs hope, and subscribe. Because we all deserve to be heard. I grew up in a strict household. My father was a decorated officer, a man everyone in town respected. To neighbours, he was the role model of honour. But behind closed doors, his respect was selective. He gave it freely to my brother, the golden son, and for me, he had nothing but criticism. "Claire, you'll never be strong enough. Claire, you'll never be smart enough. Claire, you'll never be like your brother." Each word felt like a hammer cracking my spirit. Yet, secretly, I burned with determination. While my father thought I was just a fragile little girl, I studied harder, trained longer, and worked silently, until the day came when I joined military law. But instead of pride, my father's face twisted with shame. "A lawyer in uniform? That's not real service. That's just paperwork." He spat those words like venom. And that was the first time I promised myself, one day, I'll prove him wrong. By the time I was in my late 20s, my father barely spoke to me. At family dinners, I became invisible. If he introduced his children, he mentioned my brother's name with pride, but skipped mine entirely. My mother tried to soften the blows, but she too lived under his shadow. Her silence hurt me even more than his insults. Still, I kept my focus. I worked on case after case, defending soldiers who couldn't defend themselves, standing against corruption within the system, and fighting battles not on the field, but in court. Then, one day, came a case that would change everything. A high-ranking officer had been accused of abusing his power, covering crimes, silencing voices, ruining lives. And the case had landed in my hands. The courtroom was packed that morning. Officers in decorated uniforms, journalists with flashing cameras, families watching with tight faces. And in the very front row, my father sat, arms crossed, jaw clenched. I could feel his eyes on me, like daggers stabbing into my back. To him, this was my chance to fail, publicly. As I stood before the judge, ready to speak, he did it. My father stood up. His voice thundered through the room. "She doesn't belong here. This woman is nothing but a disgrace. She's not fit to wear that uniform." The entire courtroom gasped. Heat flushed into my cheeks, my hands trembled. I had faced ruthless officers, corrupt men, impossible cases, but nothing cut me deeper than my own father's voice tearing me apart in front of everyone. For a moment, I wanted to run. I wanted to disappear, to hide, to protect myself from the shame. But then I remembered every insult, every time he erased me, every time he made me feel like less than nothing. And something inside me snapped. I lifted my chin, steadied my breath, and spoke with all the fire I had buried for years. "Your Honour, if I may continue." The judge nodded slowly, his eyes sharp, commanding silence in the room. My father sat back down, fuming. and I began to present the case, clear, precise, and with evidence so strong that even the defense struggled to breathe. I could feel the shift in the air. Every word was a blade cutting through the lies that had been woven for years. Every sentence carried not just my voice, but the voices of those who had been silenced. Hours passed like minutes. Witnesses testified, evidence was revealed, truths were spoken. But the real storm came at the very end. When the verdict was ready, the judge rose from his seat. Everyone stood. I could hear the pounding of my heartbeat louder than any gavel. And then he turned toward me. The entire courtroom froze. "Commander Claire Hayes," he said, his voice firm and unwavering. "Please, rise." The words cut through the silence like lightning. My father's eyes widened. The same man who had spat at me, who had called me nothing, now sat in disbelief. Because in that moment, the truth had finally been revealed. The silence after the judge's words felt like thunder echoing in my ears. For a second, I thought maybe I misheard him. But no, he had said it clearly. "Commander Claire Hayes, please rise." I rose slowly, my legs trembling, my breath caught in my throat. The air around me seemed to shift, like the entire courtroom had been pulled into another world where the truth could no longer be hidden. People turned their heads, whispers broke out, and cameras flashed like 1,000 lightning strikes. My father's face turned pale. He gripped the armrest of his chair so tightly, his knuckles turned white. This was the moment he had always dreaded. The moment his nothing daughter stood taller than him. I met the judge's eyes, steady and firm. He gave me a slight nod, as if to say, "This is your moment." And then he spoke again, his voice heavy with authority. "For her exceptional service in military law, for her courage in standing against corruption, even at great personal risk, and for her unwavering dedication to justice, Commander Hayes is hereby honoured today." The room erupted in applause. Officers in uniform stood, saluting. Even the journalists lowered their cameras in respect. I should have felt triumphant, but my heart ached. Because even as the world honoured me, all I wanted was for my father to be proud. But when I glanced at him, his eyes were burning, not with pride, but with rage. He shook his head, whispering under his breath, "No, this can't be." The judge called me forward to receive a Medal of Honour. My steps echoed on the marble floor as I walked up to the stand. My chest was heavy, but my head was high. I accepted the medal, feeling the cold weight of it in my hands. The audience stood, clapping, and a wave of emotion washed over me. In that moment, I realised something. Recognition from the world was powerful, yes, but recognition from yourself, the acceptance that you are enough, was the true victory. For the first time in years, I didn't crave my father's approval. I had become my own strength. As the ceremony ended, people came up to congratulate me. Some whispered, "We always believed in you." Others said, "You're an inspiration." But in the corner of my eye, I saw my father storm out of the courtroom, his shoulders stiff, his pride shattered. The ache in my chest grew heavier. I had proved him wrong, yes, but I hadn't healed the wound between us. And that wound ran deep. Later that night, I returned to my apartment. The medal lay on my desk, shining under the lamp. But instead of joy, I felt a hollow emptiness. I replayed my father's words over and over. "You are nothing. You're a disgrace." No applause could erase them. The next morning, my phone rang. It was my mother. Her voice was trembling. "Claire, your father collapsed last night. He's in the hospital." My heart skipped a beat. Without another word, I grabbed my keys and rushed out the door. When I arrived at the hospital, I saw him lying in the bed, pale and weak, tubes running from his arms. For the first time, he looked small. Not the towering figure of authority I had always known, but just a man. Fragile, human, and broken. He opened his eyes slowly and looked at me. For a moment, silence hung between us like a heavy curtain. Then his lips parted. Why did you come? His voice was weak, but his pride was still there, stubborn as ever. Tears welled up in my eyes. Because no matter what you think of me, you're still my father. He turned his face away, ashamed. I wanted a son who would carry my legacy. Instead, I got you. The words stung, sharper than any blade. But instead of anger, I felt a strange calm. I leaned closer and whispered, and yet, here I am, carrying not just your legacy, but a greater one. I didn't need to be your son to prove my worth. I needed to be myself. His eyes flickered, and for the first time, I saw something crack inside him. A mixture of pain or regret, and maybe, just maybe, realization. Before he could respond, the doctor entered and asked me to step outside. I stood in the hallway, my mind spinning. Would he ever change? Would he ever accept me? Or had I fought my whole life for the approval of a man who was too broken to give it? I didn't have the answers yet. All I knew was that the story wasn't over. And deep down, I felt something coming, a twist that would test me even more than the courtroom ever had. I waited outside the hospital room, my mind heavy with everything that had just happened. The hallway smelled faintly of antiseptic, and every beep from the machines behind the door reminded me of how fragile life really was. I leaned against the wall, fighting back tears. All my life I had fought for his recognition, and even now, with him lying weak in that bed, he still couldn't give it. A nurse passed by, offering me a sympathetic glance. I forced a small smile, but inside I felt shattered. Was this how it would end? Would my father take his last breath, still believing I was a disgrace? Hours later, my mother stepped out of the room. Her eyes were red, her hands trembling. She tried to speak, but her voice cracked. "Claire, he wants to see you." My heart skipped a beat. For a moment, I hesitated. What if he just threw more insults at me? What if he died with bitterness on his tongue? But then I reminded myself, I wasn't that weak girl anymore. I was stronger now, strong enough to face him no matter what he said. I walked inside. The room was dim, the blinds half closed, casting soft shadows on the walls. My father looked even smaller than before, his breathing shallow, his skin pale. His eyes followed me as I approached, and for the first time in my life, I didn't see judgment there. I saw something else, something I had never expected. Fear. He tried to sit up but coughed violently. I rushed to his side and steadied him. For a moment, his hand brushed mine, and I felt the weight of years pressing between us. His voice was raspy when he spoke. "Claire, there are things you don't know." I frowned. "What do you mean?" He swallowed hard, his throat dry. "I was hard on you because I thought it would make you stronger, but I went too far. I pushed you away instead." His eyes glistened with tears that he quickly blinked back. "I wanted to mold you into something you were never meant to be. And when you chose your own path, I couldn't accept it." My chest tightened. After years of cold words and cutting stares, hearing this felt like a storm breaking. Yet deep inside, anger still fought with the relief. "Do you know how much you hurt me? Do you know how many nights I cried, wishing you'd just say you were proud of me?" His eyes closed and a tear slipped down his cheek. "I know, and it haunts me." The silence stretched between us, heavy and raw. I wanted to forgive him, but forgiveness wasn't simple. Wounds that deep didn't just vanish. They left scars. Before I could answer, the door opened and a doctor entered with a clipboard. "Commander Hayes, I need a word with you." I followed him into the hallway, my heart pounding. He looked at me carefully before speaking. "Your father's condition is serious, but there's another matter, one you should know." Confusion swept over me. "What is it?" He hesitated. "Your father requested that, in case anything happens to him, all his military files and personal letters be handed over to you. Only you." I froze. "To me? Not to my brother?" The doctor nodded. "Only you." My mind spun. For years he had treated me as nothing. Why now? Why would he leave something so personal in my hands? I went back inside, my eyes locked on him. He looked weaker than before, but when he saw me, a faint smile touched his lips. "There's more to my story than you know, Claire. The files, they'll explain everything." I sat beside him, my hands trembling. "Why me? After everything, why not your precious son?" His lips curved in something almost like regret. "Because you're the only one strong enough to face the truth." The beeping of the monitor quickened. Nurses rushed in, telling me to step aside. Panic filled me as they worked around him, adjusting tubes, checking his heart. My mother clutched my arm, her face pale. "Please, don't let him go like this." I stood frozen, my heart racing. In that moment, I realised this wasn't just about winning his approval anymore. This was about uncovering secrets that could change everything I thought I knew about my father and about myself. And deep inside, I knew this was only the beginning. That night, I couldn't sleep. The hospital corridors were eerily quiet, the kind of silence that made every little sound louder. The squeak of a nurse's shoes, the faint buzz of fluorescent lights. I sat in a chair outside my father's room, staring at the floor, my mind chasing his words again and again. "You're the only one strong enough to face the truth." What truth? What secrets had he hidden in those files? And why give them to me, the daughter he had spent years calling a disgrace? Around dawn, a young orderly brought me a small box. "Your father asked us to hand this to you," he said softly. I took it with trembling hands. It wasn't large, but it felt heavy, as if the weight inside was more than paper and ink. I carried it to the hospital chapel, the only quiet place I could find. Sunlight streamed through stained glass, painting colours on the floor. My hands shook as I opened the box. Inside, I found old letters, photographs, and official military documents marked confidential. The first letter was addressed to me. My heart pounded as I unfolded the fragile paper. His handwriting was sharp, controlled, just like him. "Claire, if you are reading this, it means I finally had the courage to admit my failures as a father. I wanted to protect you from a truth I thought would break you, but you deserve to know." My eyes blurred with tears as I read on. "Your grandfather was betrayed by his own men. His honour was destroyed in silence, and the truth buried with him. I swore I would raise a son to restore our family's name. When you came into this world instead, I failed to see that you were stronger than any son I could have hoped for. Instead of raising you, I tried to mould you into something you didn't need to be. That was my greatest mistake." My chest tightened, and I pressed the letter to my heart. All my life I thought his cruelty came from hatred. But now I saw it came from fear, and his inability to let go of the past. I dug deeper into the box. There were files about a case, a scandal covered up decades ago, involving men my father once served with. It was shocking, filled with details of corruption, betrayal, and silence bought with fear. My father had carried this secret all his life, and now he was passing it to me. I understood then. He didn't just want me to forgive him, he wanted me to finish what he could not. As I sat in the chapel clutching the papers, I heard footsteps. My brother, Michael, stood in the doorway, his face tight with anger. "So it's true," he spat. "He gave it all to you." I wiped my tears quickly. "Michael, this isn't about me or you. This is about the truth." He stepped closer, his eyes dark. "No, Claire. This is about him choosing you over me. Again. After everything, he gives his legacy to the daughter who never deserved it." His words cut deep, but I held my ground. I didn't ask for this, but I won't throw it away. If there's corruption that needs to be exposed, I'll finish it. Michael's jaw clenched. "If you try, you'll ruin everything. Do you think those powerful men will let you tear down their names? They'll destroy you." I looked down at the papers in my hands, then back at him. "Then let them try." He stared at me for a long moment before storming out, his footsteps echoing down the hallway. My hands were trembling, but inside I felt a fire rising. For years I had fought for my father's recognition, but now I was fighting for something bigger. For justice, for truth, for every soldier silenced by lies. When I returned to my father's room later, he was awake, his breathing laboured but his eyes searching. He noticed the box in my hands and gave a weak nod. "You saw it?" "Yes," I whispered, "and I'll see it through." His lips curved into the faintest smile, and a single tear slid down his cheek. "Then I can rest." I gripped his hand, my throat tight. "Don't talk like that. You'll make it through this." But deep down, I knew he was fading. The machines beeped softly beside him, steady but fragile. His hand squeezed mine one last time, and he whispered, "I'm proud of you." The words I had waited my whole life to hear broke me completely. Tears streamed down my face, and I couldn't stop them. For the first time, my father saw me, not as a disgrace, not as a failure, but as his daughter. That night, he passed away. The hospital lights blurred through my tears as I walked out into the cold night air. The box of secrets pressed against my chest. My journey with him had ended, but a new one was beginning. I didn't know then just how dangerous it would become. The day of my father's funeral came faster than I was ready for. Soldiers lined the path outside the chapel, their uniforms crisp, their salutes sharp. The air was thick with grief and honour. As I walked behind the casket, holding the folded full flag that would be laid upon it, I felt the eyes of my entire family on me. Some glared with resentment, others whispered in confusion. Michael wouldn't even look at me. He stood stiff beside our mother, his jaw clenched, anger radiating from every part of him. I knew what he was thinking, that I had stolen our father's final respect, that somehow I had taken his place. But he didn't know the truth yet. He didn't know the burden our father had handed me. During the service, the chaplain spoke about honour, duty, and sacrifice. Words that seemed too heavy and too empty all at once. I kept my head down, my thoughts drifting back to the box of files hidden in my apartment. My father's secret was burning a hole in my chest, demanding to be revealed. After the final salute and the sound of the bugle playing taps, people began to leave. But I stayed behind, staring at the headstone freshly carved with my father's name. For years I had hated him. For years I had longed for his approval. And now, in death, he had finally given me both his pride and his burden. That night, I spread the files across my kitchen table. The papers were old but damning. Evidence of corruption, names of officers who had betrayed their oaths, payments made to cover crimes, and my father's notes, scribbled in the margins, revealing how he had tried to fight it, only to be silenced by those above him. My hands trembled as I read. This wasn't just history. Some of the men named were still alive, some still powerful. If I brought this to light, it wouldn't just restore my grandfather's honour, it would shake the foundations of people who had ruled unchecked for decades. The phone rang, jolting me. When I answered, a deep voice spoke, low and threatening. "Stop digging into things that don't belong to you." My blood ran cold. "Who is this?" Silence. Then the line went dead. I stood frozen, the phone still pressed to my ear. My heart pounded. They knew. Somehow, they already knew I had the files. The next day, when I went to work, I could feel the shift. Some colleagues avoided my eyes. Others whispered when I passed. And then my commanding officer called me into his office. He closed the door behind me, his expression grave. "Claire, what exactly have you been looking into?" I hesitated. "Sir, just reviewing old case files." His gaze hardened. "Don't play games with me. You're treading dangerous waters. Leave the past where it belongs." I clenched my fists at my sides. "With all due respect, sir, the past isn't buried. It's still shaping the present. Soldiers are still paying for crimes that were never punished." His jaw tightened, and for a moment I thought he might actually admire my courage, but instead he sighed. "You're not your father. Don't make his mistakes." His words hit me like a blade, not because they hurt, but because they confirmed what I already feared. People in power wanted this buried, and they would do anything to keep it that way. That night, when I returned home, my apartment door was ajar. My stomach twisted. Slowly, I stepped inside. The papers that had covered my table were gone. The box, empty. I dropped to my knees, my chest heaving. They had taken everything. But as I pulled myself together, I noticed something. One file had slipped under the couch, overlooked. I snatched it up, clutching it like a lifeline. Inside was a single photo. My father standing with a group of men, his arm around one in particular. On the back, my father had written just 3 words: "Trust no one." I realised then that this wasn't just my fight anymore. It was a war. I sat in the dark that night, the photo trembling in my hands. My father had carried this weight for decades, crushed beneath it, destroyed by it, but he had passed it to me because he believed I was strong enough. And maybe, just maybe, he was right. I didn't know who was watching me, I didn't know who I could trust, but I knew one thing: this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. I didn't sleep that night. Every sound outside my window made me flinch. The hum of a passing car, the distant bark of a dog, even the creak of the old pipes in my building. I knew someone had been inside my apartment, and if they could break in once, they could do it again. The stolen files were proof enough. They wanted me silenced. But as much as fear pressed against my chest, a deeper fire burned stronger. They could take the papers, but they couldn't take what I had already read, what I had already memorized. The names, the dates, the crimes, they were carved into me now. The next morning, I went to the courthouse early. My plan was reckless, maybe even dangerous, but it was all I had left. I asked to see Judge Williams, the same judge who had honoured me days earlier. He was surprised to see me, but he invited me into his chambers. "Commander Hayes," he said, adjusting his glasses, "what brings you here so urgently?" I hesitated, searching his face for any sign I could trust him. Finally, I placed the single photo from the hidden file on his desk. His eyes narrowed as he picked it up. "You knew my father," I said quietly. "You served alongside him, and you know this isn't just some old memory. There's a truth buried here, and I need your help to bring it out." The judge's face tightened. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, with a deep sigh, he leaned back in his chair. "Claire, there are things that can ruin a person. Entire careers can be destroyed, reputation shattered. Are you prepared for that? I met his gaze without flinching. My father lived his whole life in silence. It killed him. I won't let it kill me too. Something shifted in his eyes. Respect, maybe even admiration. He slid the photo back to me. If you want to pursue this, you'll need allies. People you can trust absolutely. Choose carefully. The same men in these files still hold power. His warning lingered in my ears as I left his office. Allies. But who? My father had told me to trust no one. My brother certainly wasn't on my side. My mother, she was too fragile, too afraid of the storm that was coming. That night, as I sat in my car outside the cemetery where my father was buried, I whispered into the cold night air, "What do I do now?" The wind rustled the trees, and for a moment I imagined his claw, his voice answering me. Be strong, be smart, finish what I couldn't. I clenched the photo in my fist. If I was going to survive this, I needed proof. Something undeniable. Something they couldn't erase, even if they tried. The next day, I drove to my father's old storage unit, a place he had rented for years but rarely mentioned. When I pushed open the creaking door, the smell of dust and old paper filled my nose. Inside were boxes stacked high, covered in cobwebs. I searched for hours, my fingers coated in grime, until finally I found a metal lockbox hidden beneath a tarp. My hand shook as I forced it open with a crowbar. Inside were more documents, journals, even cassette tapes labelled with dates. My breath caught in my throat. This was it. This was what they hadn't found. As I flipped through one of the journals, I felt a chill crawl up my spine. Names of officers, payments, cover-ups, but also something more. My own name written in my father's hand. If anything happens to me, Claire must be the one to finish this. She has the strength, the fire. She will not bend. Tears blurred my vision, but I kept reading. My father had believed in me more than he ever admitted. His cruelty had been his way of preparing me, though it nearly destroyed us both. Now, in these pages, he had finally written the words I needed to hear. I trust her. I closed the box and hugged it to my chest. For the first time, I felt something shift inside me. Not just the pain of his rejection, but the strength of his faith. He had passed me the torch. But as I carried the box to my car, headlights flashed behind me. A black SUV pulled into the lot, its engine growling. My stomach twisted. They had found me. The doors opened and two men stepped out, dressed in plain black suits. One called out, his voice cold. "Commander Hayes, you have something that doesn't belong to you." I tightened my grip on the box. My heart pounded so loud I could hear it in my ears. "It was never yours," I said, my voice trembling but firm. "It's the truth, and you can't bury it forever." The man smirked. "We buried your father, don't make us bury you too." Fear stabbed through me, but I forced myself to stand tall. This was the moment I had been walking toward all my life, the moment when I had to decide if I would live in fear like my father, or fight back, no matter the cost. And deep inside, I already knew my answer. The two men in black suits stepped closer, their shoes crunching against the gravel of the storage lot. My breath quickened, but I refused to move back. The box in my arms suddenly felt heavier than the world itself. It wasn't just a collection of files and tapes anymore. It was the truth my father had carried in silence, the truth people had tried to bury for decades, and now it was mine to protect. "Hand it over," one of them said, his tone low, calm, but laced with menace. "You don't understand what you're holding. This will ruin you." I gripped the box tighter, pressing it against my chest. "No," I said. My voice trembled, but didn't break. "This isn't about me. It's about justice. about people whose lives were destroyed while men like you walked free." The taller man smirked. "Spoken like your father, and look what happened to him." His words sliced through me, but instead of breaking me, they ignited something inside. My father had carried this truth until it crushed him. But I wasn't going to let it crush me. "I'm not him," I said sharply. "I'll finish what he couldn't." The men exchanged a glance, then stepped closer. My heart pounded. I glanced around, looking for an escape, but the lot was empty, silent except for the low rumble of their SUV's engine. For a second, panic threatened to swallow me whole, but then I remembered the words scribbled in my father's journal. "She will not bend." With a sudden burst of courage, I turned and ran. Gravel scattered under my boots as I sprinted toward my car. Behind me, I heard their footsteps thunder across the ground past shouts cutting through the night air. My fingers shook as I fumbled for my keys, flung the box into the passenger seat, and dove inside. The engine roared to life just as one of them reached my door. He slammed his hand against the glass, his face twisted with fury. I threw the car into gear and sped off, tires screeching. The SUV's headlights flared in my rearview mirror. They were following me. My pulse hammered as the city lights blurred past. Every turn I took, they stayed close. Every red light felt like a death sentence. I drove with one hand gripping the wheel, the other clutching the box as if letting go would mean losing everything. Finally, I pulled into a crowded parking garage downtown, weaving between cars until I found a dark corner. I killed the engine, my chest heaving, sweat dripping down my back. The SUV circled once, its headlights sweeping across the concrete. But then it moved on, disappearing into the night. I sat there in the dark, clutching the box, my whole body trembling. For the first time, I realized the scale of what I was up against. This wasn't just a fight for recognition anymore. This was a war against men who would rather kill than let the truth come out. The next morning, I took the box to someone I thought I could trust, an old colleague from the academy, Captain Reyes. He had always been fair, always believed in integrity above power. If anyone could help me, it was him. When I laid the box on his desk, his eyes widened. "Claire, do you know what this is?" "Yes," I whispered, "and I know it's dangerous. But I can't let it disappear again. I need help bringing it forward the right way." Reyes rubbed his chin, his brows furrowed. "You understand this will make enemies of powerful men. They'll do everything to silence you." I nodded. "They already tried." He leaned back in his chair, studying me for a long moment. Then he gave a small nod. "All right, but if we do this, we do it carefully. No leaks, no mistakes." Relief washed over me, but a small seed of doubt lingered. Could I really trust him? My father's warning echoed in my mind. Trust no one. That night as I left his office, I felt eyes on me again. A shadow moved at the corner of the street. A chill crept down my spine. I quickened my pace, gripping the strap of my bag where one of the tapes from the box lay hidden. When I reached my apartment, the door was unlocked. Again. My stomach dropped. I stepped inside slowly, my pulse pounding in my ears. Everything looked untouched, but on the table was a single envelope with my name scrawled across it. Hands trembling, I tore it open. Inside was a single sheet of paper. "Stop now, or your mother is next." My knees weakened and I nearly collapsed. The paper fluttered from my hands to the floor. They weren't just after me anymore. They were threatening the only person I had left. I sank into a chair, clutching my head. My father had died carrying this burden. And now, if I wasn't careful, my mother could pay the price too. But as fear gnawed at me, anger burned hotter. They thought they could scare me into silence. They thought they could control me with threats. They didn't know me. Not yet, because I wasn't just my father's daughter anymore. I was his legacy, and I was ready to fight. I barely slept that night. Every shadow on the wall looked like a threat. Every creak in the building sounded like footsteps creeping toward me. The note lay on the table, its words seared into my mind. "Stop now, or your mother is next." I wanted to crumble. I wanted to curl into myself and pretend this nightmare wasn't real. But then I thought of my father, how he had spent his entire life in silence, suffocating under the weight of secrets. I thought of the tears in his eyes when he finally said he was proud of me. He hadn't passed me this burden so I could run away. He had passed it to me because he believed I could stand when he no longer could. At sunrise, I drove straight to my mother's house. The air was heavy with morning mist, and dew clung to the windows of her small home. She opened the door with tired eyes, her robe wrapped tightly around her. "Claire," she whispered, her voice trembling. "What's going on? Men were outside last night, just standing there, watching. I didn't sleep." My chest tightened. They were already circling her like vultures. I stepped inside quickly, locking the door behind me. "Mom, you have to trust me. I can't explain everything yet, but you're in danger because of me. You need to pack a bag. I'm taking you somewhere safe." Her eyes widened. "Safe? Claire, what are you involved in?" I swallowed hard. The truth, something Dad carried for years, something people would kill to keep hidden. Tears filled her eyes. She pressed a hand over her mouth, shaking her head. "I can't lose you too. First, your father. Now this?" I gripped her shoulders gently. "You won't lose me. But I need you to listen to me. Just this once. Please." Reluctantly, she packed a small bag. I drove her out of town to a cabin owned by an old family friend, someone I trusted, someone off the radar. As I dropped her off, she clung to my hand. "Claire, promise me you'll come back." "I promise," I whispered, even though I wasn't sure I could keep it. When I returned to the city, I knew what I had to do. The threats, the break-ins, the men in suits, it all pointed to one thing. They were terrified of the truth coming out, which meant the truth was my greatest weapon. I took the hidden tape from my bag, the one I had saved when the rest of the files were stolen. I hadn't listened to it yet. My hands shook as I slid it into an old recorder. My father's voice crackled through the static, rough but steady. "If you're hearing this, it means I couldn't finish the fight. The men you're about to expose aren't just officers. They're leaders, politicians, businessmen, men who built empires on silence and lies. I tried to gather proof, but I was only one man. You'll need more than evidence. You'll need courage. And Claire, if it's you holding this tape, then I believe you have it." My throat closed as tears welled in my eyes. His voice was like a ghost in the room, wrapping around me, steadying me. But then the recording shifted. A second voice entered the tape, one I didn't recognize. A deep, cold voice, dripping with authority. "If you ever release this, Hayes, it won't just be you who pays. It'll be your family, your wife, your children. Think carefully." I gasped, my hand flying to my mouth. My father had been threatened years ago, the same way I was being threatened now. They had kept him silent with fear, and now they were trying to do the same to me. But fear was no longer enough. I copied the tape into a secure drive, then made duplicates. One hidden in my apartment, another locked in my car, a third mailed to a trusted journalist. If they tried to erase me, the truth would still find its way into the light. Later that evening, I met with Captain Reyes again. His face was serious, his jaw tense. "Claire, I've been digging quietly. The names in those files, they go higher than we thought. Generals, senators, men who can crush careers with a single phone call." "I don't care," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. They've hidden in the shadows for too long. If I have to stand alone, I will. Reyes shook his head. You won't be alone, but understand, when this breaks, there's no turning back. They'll come after you harder than ever. I looked him straight in the eye. Let them. I'm done hiding. That night, I walked out of the courthouse with the tape in my pocket, the city lights glowing against the dark sky. For the first time, I felt ready to face whatever storm was coming. But as I stepped onto the street, I noticed a black SUV parked across the road, its headlights off, its engine humming low. My stomach tightened. The window rolled down slowly, and a familiar voice called out from the shadows. Claire, get in the car. We need to talk. It was Michael. The sight of Michael sitting in that black SUV made my heart skip. For weeks, he had glared at me with nothing but resentment, convinced that I had stolen our father's last legacy. Now, here he was, calling me into the very kind of car I'd been running from. My instincts screamed danger. I stayed on the curb, my fists clenched. What do you want, Michael? I asked, my voice sharp. He leaned forward, his face barely visible in the dim glow of the dashboard. Claire, please, just get in. I don't have much time. The word please caught me off guard. Michael never begged, never pleaded. Against my better judgment, I slid into the passenger seat, my hand hovering close to the small recorder hidden in my coat pocket. The doors locked automatically. My pulse quickened. If you're here to scare me... He cut me off, his voice low and tense. I'm not. I'm here to warn you. You're in over your head, Claire. These people, these men Dad went after, they're bigger than you can imagine. They don't just control the military. They control money, politics, entire cities. I narrowed my eyes. Then, why are you here? To tell me to give up, to finish what they started. His jaw tightened. For a moment, he didn't answer. Then, with a shaky breath, he said, because I was part of it. The words slammed into me like a punch. What? Michael's hands tightened on the steering wheel. I was young, stupid, desperate to prove myself. They offered me money, influence, a career path that would shoot straight to the top. All I had to do was keep my mouth shut when Dad started digging. I thought it was harmless. But then I realised they weren't just covering corruption. They were destroying lives. I felt my stomach twist. You betrayed him. You betrayed Dad. His voice cracked. I know, and it's eating me alive. Silence filled the car, thick and suffocating. I wanted to scream at him, hit him, hate him. But more than that, I wanted the truth. Why tell me now? Michael's eyes glistened in the dark. Because you're the only one left who can finish this. And because they'll kill you if you're not careful. They already tried with Dad. I can't let them take you too. I stared at him, searching for lies. But all I saw was a broken man drowning in guilt. You knew about the threats? I asked softly. He nodded. I knew everything. I knew they warned him, I knew they silenced him, and I said nothing. That's my sin. He turned to me, his face pale. But maybe helping you now can be my redemption. My throat tightened. I wanted to believe him, but my father's warning echoed in my mind. Trust no one. Michael reached into his jacket slowly. My body tensed, ready to fight, but instead of a weapon, he pulled out a small flash drive. He placed it on the dashboard between us. This, he said, is a copy of files Dad gave me years ago. I never had the courage to use it, but maybe you do. I stared at the drive, my heart racing. If it was real, it could be the missing piece I needed, the undeniable proof to bring everything crashing down. But was this another trap? Before I could decide, headlights flared in the rearview mirror. Another SUV pulled into the lot, its engine growling. Michael's face went pale. "They found us," he whispered. My pulse hammered. "Who?" "Them," he said simply, and slammed his foot on the gas. The tyres screeched as we shot forward, weaving through the dark streets. In the side mirror, the black SUV followed close, its lights blinding. Michael's knuckles were white against the wheel. "Hold on!" he shouted as we cut sharply down an alley, trash cans crashing against the bumper. Bullets cracked through the night, shattering the back window. I ducked, clutching the flash drive in my fist. My heart roared in my ears. "Michael," I screamed, "where are you taking us?" He gritted his teeth. "Somewhere safe. Somewhere they can't follow." But even as he said it, I wasn't sure if anywhere was safe anymore. The chase tore through the city like a nightmare come to life. Sirens wailed in the distance, lights blurred past, tyres screeched on every corner, and through it all, one truth burned in my chest. This fight wasn't just mine anymore, it was ours. And if we didn't survive tonight, the truth might die with us. The city blurred around us as Michael pushed the SUV to its limits. My hands clutched the dashboard, the flash drive digging into my palm. Behind us, headlights blazed closer, their beams cutting through the night like predators locked on their prey. Bullets cracked again, one smashing through the rearview mirror, glass raining across the seats. "Michael, they're going to kill us!" I shouted, my voice trembling. "Not if we lose them first," he growled, his eyes locked on the road. We swerved into a narrow street lined with shuttered shops, tyres screeching, metal scraping as the SUV barely fit. The pursuing vehicle clipped a lamppost but kept coming, relentless. I could hear the roar of its engine chasing us like a beast that wouldn't stop until it devoured us whole. Michael slammed the brakes suddenly, spinning the wheel hard. The SUV skidded sideways, sparks flying as we slid into an abandoned warehouse lot. For a moment, silence. Then, crunching tyres. They had followed us in. Michael cursed under his breath. "Out! Now!" We jumped from the SUV, feet pounding against cracked concrete as we sprinted into the dark interior of the warehouse. Rusted machinery loomed like skeletons, shadows stretching across the walls. My chest heaved, every nerve on fire. The sound of car doors slamming echoed outside. Heavy footsteps followed, slow, deliberate. They weren't rushing. They knew they had us cornered. I pressed against a column, whispering, "Michael, what do we do?" He pulled something from his jacket. A small handgun. He shoved it into my hands. "Take it." I froze. "No, I've never..." "Claire." His voice cut through the panic. "If they catch you, the files die with you. You can't let that happen." The weight of the gun in my hands was terrifying, but the weight of my father's legacy pressed heavier on my soul. I nodded, my breath shaky but determined. The footsteps grew louder. Then a voice, deep and mocking, filled the darkness. "Commander Hayes, brave like your father, stubborn like him too, and we all know how that ended." The sound bounced through the warehouse, impossible to track. My heart pounded. I aimed the gun toward the shadows, my finger trembling on the trigger. Michael stepped forward, shouting into the dark, "Leave her out of this! This fight is with me too!" Laughter echoed, cold and merciless. "Oh, Michael, you've always been a coward hiding in our pockets. Did you think giving her that drive would save your soul?" Michael's face twisted in guilt, but his voice stayed firm. "I'm done with you. I won't be your pawn anymore." A single gunshot rang out, sparks flying from the column beside him. I screamed, grabbing his arm, pulling him back into cover. "Run!" Michael hissed. "Take the drive and run!" But I couldn't. Not again. Not like Dad. I squeezed the gun tighter, my breath steadying. No, we finished this. The shadows shifted, and one of the men stepped into a strip of light, tall, broad-shouldered, his suit crisp, his expression calm, as if he wasn't hunting, but already certain of victory. His eyes locked on me, and a thin smile curved his lips. "You think exposing us will change anything?" he said, his voice smooth, confident. "We built this system. We are the law. And you're just one woman with a box of paper and a shaky gun." Rage surged through me, stronger than fear. I stepped out from behind the column, gun raised, voice steady. "No, I'm a commander, and I have the truth, and that's more powerful than any of you." For the first time, his smile faltered. Then, before either of us could move, the warehouse exploded with blinding light. Dozens of figures stormed in, armed officers in tactical gear, their shouts echoing through the steel. "Federal Task Force, drop your weapons!" The men in suits froze, their confidence cracking as rifles levelled against them. Michael grabbed my hand, pulling me back as chaos erupted. Shouts, clattering weapons, the heavy thud of bodies hitting the ground. One of the officers approached me, his face grim but respectful. "Commander Hayes, we've been monitoring this for weeks. We got your signal." My chest heaved. "Signal?" He nodded toward Michael, who looked at me with tired eyes. "I called them, Claire. The night I gave you the drive, I also told them everything. I couldn't let you carry this alone." Tears blurred my vision as relief and fury mixed inside me. I wanted to scream at him for not warning me, but instead I just let out a shaky breath. "You should have told me." "I know," he whispered, "but at least now it's over." But deep inside I knew it wasn't. Arrests were just the beginning. The files, the names, the threats, this was bigger than any single warehouse raid. Still, as I looked at the men being dragged out in handcuffs, something inside me shifted. For the first time, I felt like I wasn't carrying my father's burden anymore. I was carrying my own mission, and I wasn't going to stop until every shadow was brought into the light. The warehouse was filled with the sound of boots pounding against steel, shouts echoing, and the clatter of weapons hitting the floor as the men in suits were forced down, handcuffed, and dragged out into the flood of flashing, being red and blue lights outside. The air reeked of gunpowder and sweat, but in that chaos, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: relief. I lowered the gun from my trembling hands, my knees weakening, as the weight of the night finally caught up with me. Michael caught my arm, steadying me. His face was pale, exhausted, but there was a softness in his eyes I hadn't seen since we were children. "It's over, Claire," he whispered. I shook my head slowly. "No, this is just the beginning." An officer approached me, a federal agent in a dark, tactical vest, his voice firm but respectful. "Commander Hayes, the information you provided, along with the drive, is enough to open an official investigation. But this won't be easy. These men, they have roots everywhere." I glanced down at the flash drive still clutched in my hand. The tiny piece of plastic felt heavier than stone. It carried names that could topple entire empires, expose men who had built their lives on power and lies. My father had been silenced before he could reveal it. Now it was in my hands. "I don't care how high it goes," I said, my voice steady. "No one is untouchable." The agent gave me a curt nod before stepping away. Outside, the night air was cold, biting against my skin, but it felt like a cleansing wind after the suffocating heat of the chase. Flashing lights painted the dark sky red and blue, and cameras from waiting journalists were already turning toward the scene. For a moment, panic flared in my chest. Was I ready for this? To stand in the open, knowing the entire world would now see me? Michael touched my shoulder. "Claire, once this goes public, your life will never be the same. You'll have enemies everywhere. They'll paint you as a traitor, maybe even try to erase you completely. I looked at him, my eyes burning with tears. They already tried, but Dad carried this truth until it broke him. If I let fear stop me now, then I'm no better than the people we're fighting. He swallowed hard, then nodded. Then I'll stand with you, whatever comes next. The words hit me harder than I expected. For years, Michael had been my rival, my father's favoured son. But now, in this broken, dangerous moment, he had chosen to stand by me. Maybe it wasn't redemption yet, but it was a start. As the suspects were loaded into armoured vans, I noticed one man glaring at me, his eyes filled with hatred even as his wrists were bound in steel. He leaned toward me as officers pulled him past. You think you've won, Commander? This isn't over. Cut off one head and 3 more will grow. His words chilled me, but instead of shrinking, I stepped closer, meeting his gaze without flinching. Then I'll cut them all off, one by one. He snarled but was shoved into the van, the door slamming shut behind him. By dawn, the warehouse lot was empty except for the lingering smell of oil and the echo of everything that had just unfolded. I stood beside my car, staring at the horizon as the first rays of sunlight painted the sky gold. I thought of my father, of the way his voice had cracked when he finally admitted he was proud of me, of the burden he had carried alone, of the secrets he had left behind for me to uncover. And for the first time, I felt like I wasn't just his daughter living in his shadow. I was his legacy, yes, but more than that, I was my own strength. Michael stood beside me, silent, the morning light softening his hardened features. After a long pause, he said quietly, Claire, maybe this is how we finally make things right. Not just for Dad, for ourselves too. I looked at him, a faint smile tugging at my lips. Then let's finish it, together. We drove away from the warehouse, the city slowly waking around us. The world was about to change whether it wanted to or not. And I was ready. But deep down, I knew the hardest part was still ahead, standing before the court, not as the daughter my father once called a disgrace, but as the commander who carried the truth. The courthouse was filled to the brim. Rows upon rows of people sat in silence, their faces tense with anticipation. Journalists crowded the back, cameras flashing, microphones raised. Uniformed officers stood tall along the walls, their eyes fixed forward, their hands pressed against their belts. This wasn't just another hearing. This was history. As I walked down the centre aisle toward the stand, whispers spread like fire. Some spoke my name with admiration. Others spat it with venom. But I didn't let it shake me. Every step I took was for the truth my father died protecting. Every breath was for the soldiers and families whose voices had been buried in silence. Michael walked behind me. For the first time in years, I felt him at my side, not as a rival, not as an enemy, but as a brother who had finally chosen to stand with me. His presence steadied me. When I reached the front, Judge Williams was already seated. His sharp eyes scanned the room, then locked on me. He gave a single nod, steady and commanding. Commander Hayes, please take the stand. The words echoed through the chamber. I sat down, my hands resting on the box of files and the flash drive in front of me. My heart pounded, but my voice was steady when I began to speak. For years, powerful men have hidden behind medals and uniforms, their crimes buried under layers of silence and fear. My father tried to expose them, and they silenced him. They called me a disgrace, said I was unworthy to wear this uniform. But today, I stand not as a disgrace, but as the daughter of a man who carried the truth in his heart until the day he died, and I will not be silenced. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Journalists scribbled furiously. The men sitting in the defence, their suits immaculate, shifted uncomfortably as I slid the flash drive across the table. The agent beside me connected it to the projector, and the screen lit up with evidence. Payments, documents, photographs, recordings. The truth blazed across the walls of the courtroom for everyone to see. And then my father's voice filled the chamber. The tape played, his words strong, even through the static. If you ever hear this, know that silence is the enemy. Truth must live, even if I do not. The room went still. For the first time, I saw tears in my mother's eyes in the front row. She pressed her hands to her face, sobbing quietly, her body trembling with both grief and pride. When the recording ended, the judge's gavel struck sharply. "Order in the court!" His voice thundered. "This evidence is clear. These men will face justice, not tomorrow, not someday, but now." The chamber erupted in noise. Reporters rushed forward. Officers stepped in to escort the accused, their once proud faces pale and broken. I sat still, my chest heaving, my hands shaking. It was over. The truth was no longer hidden. My father's silence had ended with me. Michael leaned close, whispering, "You did it, Claire. You finished what he started." I turned to him, tears brimming in my eyes. "No, we did it, together." Outside the courthouse, the sunlight was blinding. Crowds gathered, reporters shouted my name, microphones pushed toward me. But I didn't stop for them. I looked up at the sky, the warmth on my face, and whispered softly, "Dad, I hope you see me now." For the first time, I didn't feel the crushing weight of his disapproval. I felt his pride. I felt his presence. And I felt free. That night, as I placed the Medal of Honor and the files side by side on my desk, I realized something. Justice wasn't a single battle. It wasn't about one victory in a courtroom. It was about the courage to keep standing, even when the world tried to silence you. I thought back to every moment my father had called me weak, every insult, every tear I had shed. And then I thought of his final words to me, whispered in the hospital bed. "I'm proud of you." Those words had healed a lifetime of wounds, and now I would carry them with me forever. The world would remember my father as a soldier who fought silently, but I would make sure they remembered me as the daughter who broke the silence. And the lesson I leave for anyone listening to my story is this: never let someone else's definition of you become your truth. Even when they call you nothing, even when they humiliate you, even when they threaten to erase you, rise, stand, fight, because the truth will always be stronger than the lie. And sometimes, the greatest revenge is not proving them wrong. It's proving yourself right.